There's a voice in your head that speaks with complete confidence. It tells you you're going to fail, that you don't deserve good things, and that something bad is going to happen. And your subconscious mind follows those instructions without stopping to check whether any of it is actually true. In fact, a Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram figured out why in 1961, and what he found changes everything about how you understand your own mind, and it also broke everyone else's understanding of how much control people actually have over their own behavior. And what he found has everything to do with why hypnosis works, why anxiety is so hard to shake, and why some hypnotists get consistent results while others wonder what they're doing wrong. Yep, we're talking about Milgram today, and I promise this is going to be more useful than anything you've learned about in school. So here's a setup. Stanley Milgram brings regular people into a Yale lab. He tells them that they're going to be a part of a study on learning and memory. They're going to be the teacher. There's a learner in the next room strapped to a chair. Now, here's the interesting thing. Every time the learner gets a question wrong, the teacher has to push a button that delivers an electric shock to the student. The shocks go up in voltage with every wrong answer. The buttons are labeled and they go all the way up to 450 volts. The last few buttons labeled danger, severe shock. And then above that, it's just XXX, which is the scientific equivalent of a skull and crossbones. Now, the learner, who is actually an actor and not getting shocked at all, the learner starts screaming. They start begging to be let out. And eventually, they go completely silent, which, if you think about it, is somehow worse than actually screaming really loud. And whenever the teacher hesitated or tried to stop, a guy in a lab coat, calm as anything, would say, "Please continue. The experiment requires that you just continue no matter what." And you know what? 65% of the participants pressed the button all the way to the 450 volts. 65%. These were not people with violent tendencies. These were regular people, visibly distressed, sometimes in tears, asking if they could stop. And they kept going anyway. Now, here's the part that actually matters for what we're talking about today. The authority figure, the guy in the lab coat, had no power to actually force anyone to do anything. He couldn't threaten them. He couldn't punish them. All he had was a calm voice and a lab coat. That's it. And that was enough for 65% of people to do something they believed was seriously harming another human being. What's really interesting is the lab coat did more work than Milgram probably expected. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, because this isn't just a creepy experiment from the 60s. This is running in your clients now if you're a hypnotist or a therapist. Think about it. Someone who grew up in a home with an alcoholic parent or trauma, the parent's word was the law, even when the word was irrational, even when it changed day to day, even when following it made the kid's life genuinely worse. The child's subconscious mind learned something very specific. Authority figures give instructions and you comply. That's the deal. The parent is not in the room anymore, but the compliance response they installed is still fully operational. So now that same person is an adult and they have an inner critic. That inner critic speaks in an authoritative tone. It's confident, it's persistent, and the subconscious doesn't evaluate whether it's right. It just registers the tone and it complies. You're going to fail. You don't deserve this. Something bad is going to happen. Pressed, pressed, pressed. For a lot of my clients with high functioning anxiety, their anxiety itself has become an authority figure. It speaks and they obey. They know consciously that the threat's not real. They've been told that by multiple therapists. And yet they comply with the anxiety signal anyway, because the subconscious doesn't take a vote. It follows the authority. For many of my clients who are adult children of alcoholics, this is almost always underneath the surface of that pattern. The authority that was installed in childhood wasn't trustworthy. It wasn't safe, sometimes wasn't even sober, and the subconscious followed it anyway because that's what the subconscious mind does with authority. They don't audit it, they just respond to it. Now, I'm going to say something that might make some hypnotists and therapists uncomfortable. And I'm going to say it anyway because it's true and it matters. Your authority in the room has nothing to do with ego. It's a clinical mechanism. And if you're not thinking about it deliberately and strategically, you're either using it well by accident or you're undermining it without even knowing it. Milgram showed us that the perception of authority is enough. The lab coat was a costume. The guy wasn't a doctor. He wasn't going to punish anyone. He just carried himself like someone whose instructions were worth following. And 65% of the people followed them to the end of the dial. When a client walks into your office, their subconscious mind is already scanning for authority. And that's not manipulation, not at all. That's just how human beings are wired. They're looking for someone who knows what they're doing, someone who isn't going to check their notes nervously and say, what I usually do here is, and I think this might work if we just do this, please let's just try this. Their subconscious mind wants a metaphorical lab coat. Now, I've watched hypnotists walk into a session and apologize for hypnosis before they even start. Some people don't go under very deeply, and don't worry if you don't feel anything. They think they're managing expectations, but what they're actually doing is dismantling the authority signal before the work even begins. The subconscious mind registers that as this person isn't sure that this is going to work. So why would I follow their instructions? If they're not sure, how can I be sure? Now, I'm not talking about being arrogant, but I'm talking about being certain. This is a massive difference, and clients feel it immediately. So here's how this actually shows up in my work that I do with clients, because I want to be specific about this rather than just giving you theory. I do non-state dependent work, meaning the person doesn't have to be in a deep hypnotic trance for the subconscious mind to receive and act on new information. And it's one of the reasons that works is that authority compliance operates at a much higher and lighter level of altered awareness than most people in this field were taught. In fact, Milgram's participants weren't hypnotized at all. They were fully awake, fully conscious, clearly distressed, and they still followed the instructions of the perceived authority figure. The compliance mechanism doesn't require deep altered states. It requires the right relational dynamic to be there. So when I'm working with a client, part of what I'm doing from the very first moment they walk in, or that we log on Zoom if we're online, is we establish a very clear signal. I know what I'm doing. I've done this with thousands of people, and your subconscious already knows how to do this. I'm just going to point it in the right direction, almost like a compass or like a GPS. And I mean every word of it. And the subconscious picks up on that. What I'm also doing is giving the client's subconscious mind a different authority to comply with, because here's what most people don't talk about. You can use the same compliance mechanism that installed the problem to update the program and get a solution. The subconscious mind doesn't care that it's been following a harmful authority for 30 years. You give it a trustworthy one in the right context, in the right condition, and it will follow that instead. Now, understand, though, that the mechanism and actually working with it, that's what separates this work from everything else that's already been tried. And I want to be honest about something here, and I want to be very clear about this. This took me a while for me to fully understand this about the work that I do. A lot of hypnotists spend enormous amounts of time learning scripts, inductions, protocols, and all that does matter. But the container those techniques live in matters just as much. And almost nobody talks about it in training. And that's one of the first things I deliver to my students. So if you walk into a session uncertain, the client's subconscious mind is going to read that. If you walk in overly casual, trying to be the client's friend before you are their practitioner, the subconscious reads that too. And believe me, I've been there. It's not looking for someone likable. It's looking for someone it can follow, someone who can guide them along this journey. Milgram ran variations of his experiment where the authority figure was less certain, or there were two authority figures who disagreed with each other, and compliance dropped significantly because the subconscious is paying attention to consistency, confidence, and clarity. Exactly the signals it would use to decide whether an authority is worth following or not. So, if you're a hypnotist watching this and you've ever had a session that felt like you were dragging someone through it, or whether client kept opening their eyes and checking in, or where their suggestions just weren't landing, one question is worth sitting with. What authority signal was sent before we even started? Whether you're watching this as someone who wants to do this work, or as who's been the receiving end as an inner critic that won't quit, the mechanism is always the same. Compliance runs on perceived authority. Your subconscious mind has been following instructions from authority figures your entire life. Some of them helpful, some of them installed by people who had no business being in charge of your nervous system or your subconscious mind or belief systems. Now, the good news is that mechanism goes both ways. The same compliance response that locked that old pattern in is the one that can just update it. You just need a different authority giving different instructions. That's it. And it needs to be done in a context where the subconscious is actually listening. That's what this work is all about. And that's what makes it different from spending another 6 years in a room understanding things that don't change, because understanding it isn't necessarily going to change it, will it? So if you want some help with this and you want my mental playbook that helps you break the trance that you didn't even choose and start running your own mind, check the description of the video, and the link's going to be in the description of this video on a page where you can grab it for free. And if you are a hypnotist or someone thinking about doing this kind of work, everything I do is also included in the link in the description. That's in the description as well. Oh, and by the way, make sure you subscribe if this was useful. And I put stuff out like this regularly, and also send this to somebody that might also find it useful. And as always, be well, do good, be true to who you are, and happy healing. Bye for now.